Hi, thanks for being here with us. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for the four of you to come all the way from Holland, some of you just from the next district. Thanks for being here. Security, what a big topic. I was asked to publish about fear and anxiety last week. And one of the things I found out doing the research for it was the more we have, the more fears we build up. So maybe we can set a frame by talking just a few sentences about what do we mean when we talk about security. Let's assume we have a secure world in the net. We have a secure cyber world. What would let us know? What are the parameters? What are the facts that we find that will let us know we're secure? Who wants to start?
I can start by that, by first saying that there's no secure world, unfortunately. But the fact is that we try to become secure. And one of the things that you need for that is visibility. You need to know what's going on. You need to know your network. You need to know your applications. And also, developers need to know their codes. And secure coding is very hard. And so secure world, it is something we hope for, but unfortunately it's not there yet. But we see progress. Everybody is doing well, I think, and we are improving. But we are fighting a highly automated threat. We are fighting also people that keep on clicking on links. So it's a challenge.
I will still try to stay on it. Okay, you said we don't have it yet. My question was, what could be criteria that would let us know that we have achieved something like security in the net?
Maybe it's not security, it's resilience.
Okay.
And, vulnerability is a strength. There's value in being vulnerable. I was at the Belvedere yesterday, and I saw Der Kuss for Gustav Klimt, which is one of the most valuable pieces of art you have here. So obviously you want to protect it. Now you can put it in a vault, then it's 100% secure, but worthless. It would only get value if you put it in a public space for everyone to approach it very near. Then it gets value. And in the digital world it's not different. The value is in being open and connected. The value is in the free flow of information, which implies that you make yourself vulnerable for cyber attacks. And then it's not preventing security about prevention, but more the ability to detect and respond. And not only to contain the damage, but also then to recover to a higher level. It's what I call the upside of cyber risk. It becomes evolutionary. Learn from your mistakes. I just saw it in the engineering culture.
So
that's resilience, not security.
Yeah, there's also an aspect of finding a right measure between having the systems attached to everyday life and still prevent it in a way that it cannot be abused more than a certain extent. Right? There may be other criteria. Any ideas you have? What would let you know we have a secure cyber world?
So I would argue, and that's maybe a negative perspective, if we are secure, then it's stable, then it's done. No more innovation. So do you want to have this? Yeah.
Okay, thanks for the provocation. What do you say?
It's an interesting question because actually the paradigm is more going in the other direction. If you talk to computer emergency response teams of large cloud environments, the paradigm they're working with is assume you've already been breached. So they're not assuming they're secure in any way. They're assuming, okay, we have been breached, we just don't know it yet. So what do we have to do about it? And this is actually a totally different approach in how to handle stuff and how to deal with incidents and what to expect also from coders and developers.
So it sounds that we deal with a living system, that if we conserve it too much, it's dead, right? And as long as it's alive, it's made by man, it's made by people. It goes in resonance with what really happens out there, and there will not be a black and white, secure or not. There will be a relation, a reasonable relation.
Yeah, and it's a dilemma. Right? So I think it is a funny story to share with you. Is on this, you had this series on Netflix, Homeland, where the vice president was killed by hacking his PC, his pacemaker. So the next day, I lead a team of hackers. 3 of the guys were on my desk. So, we want to order a pacemaker because we want to test to see whether it actually can be done. And I said, okay, go ahead. So they ordered a pacemaker, they tested it, and they came back with the results, and they were shocked. They said, but really, it's not secured at all. We could just connect, we could manipulate, we could do anything. So I also was shocked. So I called the manufacturer. We had a meeting, and we presented him with the results. And then he explained to us, what it is. If you have a pacemaker, you have a heart attack. Then if they want to use the defibrillator, then this emergency service needs to access your pacemaker. They need to shut it off, because otherwise you get a shortcut. So if we protect it with, for example, a difficult password, it actually is more dangerous. So that there's this dilemma, I call it the digital dilemma, and being open and being transparent and being vulnerable it's a paradox. So closed and secure is not always the safe way.
Okay. So it's about security. Security is about risk mitigation. How much risk are you allowed to take, or are you willing to take, and how much costs and money are you going to invest into security? It always has to do with risks, and exactly the example that Roel mentioned, the pacemaker, that is about risks. How big is the risk that somebody helps that person with the pacemaker, or that somebody hacks into it? It's always a balance.
Yeah, and look at what connect, because you then can say, let's disconnect all the pacemakers because this is a risk we don't want to. But then you forget about the fact how connected pacemakers actually enhances and saves lives. So there is always a balance between the two. Yeah.
So maybe Markus, one of the things that you said in a previous talk we had fits into here. How much do software builders invest in security from the beginning when they start developing software? Can you share a bit of your experience with us?
The short answer is not enough. And the problem is not so much the investment per se. We have, of course, we have a lot of companies, and they ask us to do penetration tests. Some of you might have heard the presentation yesterday from our colleague Tom, the life of a pen tester. They're willing to spend money. The problem is they're basically spending it at the end of the development of the project development. Whereas they should start spending it at the beginning of the project, starting when you build up the architecture. What are the potential threats? What's the environment we're working with? What's the technology we're actually using? When we come and do a pen test, it will be the same with you. Basically, you're finding symptoms, but in many cases, it's very difficult to fix the underlying problems because they may be architectural. And the architecture, after a 2-3 year development project, the architecture is not something you can change very easily. I mean, it means really a lot of work. So thinking of software development not solely as a project that has a fixed start and end, and then we ship it and everything is good, but more in terms of a life cycle of a constant process up to the end of the usage is, I think, something that many developers are still missing. And that's interesting because we just talked before this discussion about Michael Howard, who wrote the book How to Write Secure Code, based on events at Microsoft. And this book was written in 2001, so it's 17 years ago. And he actually describes basically a secure software development lifecycle process. And I think this is still, if we come to companies, very few do have any of that, and almost none has it sufficiently, I think.
Okay. So how come, if some companies prove, we have an example here, we'll get there in a moment, how come if it pays off in the middle and long run that people do not invest in security from the beginning?
Well, there are a couple of factors. How many startups are in this room? Hands up. Okay, not too many. Those who are, Usually you have a running rate of, I don't know, 6 months, 12 months or something like this. And the thing you want to achieve, which is a terrible term, is the least viable product. So the product that the word itself says there's no security in it. We're happy that it does what it's supposed to do. Who wants to think about security at this stage? So it's the same with it's basically a risk question. So the risk of us not existing in 6 months anymore is much higher than that you have a GDPR issue, somebody is suing you because he loses data. Who cares if we don't exist anymore? I think this is true for most of the smaller companies. Also, the customers are often not willing to pay a premium for security. They just take the cheapest developer. They don't care. I mean, of course, they request security, but they don't really care as long as nothing happens. As soon as something happens, they're getting interested. But before that, it's always a game in terms of who's the cheapest, who has the cheapest offering. So I think this is one of the main reasons.
Harald, you sit here as an expert and as a person, but you also sit here as a representative of a big company that is known to invest quite a bit in security. Can you let us know a little bit why you invest a lot of it in security, how you do it, and how it pays off at the end? It has to have a reason why you do it.
I just was thinking, I joined Microsoft 2001 when Michael Howard did this keynote it was San Francisco, I think so. Since that, a lot of things has changed. Yeah? Give you some numbers. Microsoft is investing annually $1 billion in security only. So we have about 1 billion users currently in the world. That means $1 per user. So on one side, that's a lot. Yeah? On the other side, $1 seems to be little. Yeah? So what's in between? That's economy of scale. Yeah? If you have the right architecture, the right business model, you can deliver, you can get for $1 high secure systems. So what's the model we rely on? Yeah? There's one element that's standardization, building on standards. That starts with standardized software development processes. I hope you know this SDL, Standardized Development Lifecycle, which is an ISO standard, describes all the phases you have to follow to ship secure software. Yeah? That's one basic. So if you're not following a standardized software development process, I would argue your software can never be safe or secure. Yeah? The second element is automation. Yeah? You heard some things like testing and pen testing. If you not automate, you will not scale. If you don't scale, it's too expensive to be secure. Yeah? And the last thing, it's in our model, is self-service. It should be easy. Everybody should do it. Yeah? And it's not once a year you do a little bit of testing, you do it continuously. Let me give you one example. So we are providing a big cloud infrastructure, and we have two teams. Maybe you have heard of the red and the blue team. Do you know this concept? Yeah? Red team, blue team. So one is always testing the infrastructure, hacking, and the other always protecting, fighting, analyzing, and so on. And that's continuously going on because we have to assume on a daily basis we are hacked. Yeah? So we are fighting against these intruders continuously. Yeah? That's the investment we are doing. Yeah? These are the process. The issue, you might argue, is how to do it if you are a small company. Yeah? Look at this best practice. You can learn a lot from them. You can copy it, you can reuse it. Don't ignore them. There is so much out there. Share it, reuse it, extend it. Yeah? That's our community, I would say.
Thank you. You guys in the audience, you know that you have the opportunity to ask questions. Please feel free if you want. We'll continue a little bit more with my questions, and then we'll see what comes from the audience. Roel, I think this is your time to jump in after what just has been said.
Yes, this is a nice bridge for my key message to all the developers and coders out here. And it's about, indeed, embedding security. And I think every coder needs to be a hacker. And that's not a stretch, because it's the same skill set, it's the same knowledge. I mean, the father of the modern computer, Alan Turing, was a hacker. He's trying to break German codes, right? And also a good hacker builds software, or reverse engineers software. He builds malware. So it's the same skill set. Only think not only in use cases, but also in abuse cases, which, by the way, is fun. Yesterday I was in the security track. There was a lot of laughter. It's fun to think like a hacker, and I would encourage every developer to do that. And it's fun in your team to not only look at use cases and test them, but also see, how can I use this system in a way it was not designed to do, and to continuously improve. I would also encourage every development team to, in their spare time or in the weekends, with their team, to do capture the flag competitions. You have the right skill set to compete in that. It's fun, it's great for team building, and you will learn a lot about security. And then indeed also in red teaming, blue teaming, the best way to assess and continuously improve cybersecurity is doing red teaming, blue teaming. And I would encourage also developers to participate in the red team, to learn how to attack, also to participate in the blue team. And guys and girls, this is fun. It's cool. So all you coders out there, become a hacker.
And I have one addition to that. I completely agree again with Roel. Make sure that you do security by design at the beginning of the process, not at the end, because at the end it will cost you more time, more money, and probably you have a problem. So start thinking security at the beginning. And as Roel said, start thinking as a hacker. Okay, what's the first thing I can do to break this code? And test it and train yourself. I was a CSO for 60 developers in a company, and we had mandatory training, and they had to hack. They had to do a pen test on their own code. They were just trained to be hackers. So, but important, start it at the beginning of the process. And security must not be an obstacle for your process, for your SDLC. It must be an enablement. That's important to keep that in mind.
Just one warning.
Go ahead, no worries.
You mentioned security by design, security by default is a very important topic currently because the general data protection is coming in force, 25th of May. My warning is, users are not security experts. Be very careful about your default decisions, what's secure by default and what not. Yeah? You cannot assume they are the experts. You should be the experts and guide them to become secure, to be more secure. Yeah? By default, that's a difficult, tricky position. Yeah.
And also important, I think, is we just talked here about security as a cost, and I think indeed what you used the right word. Security is an enabler. It enables innovation. It enables the use of data, and I think GDPR, the new stringent privacy regulations, is a great example. So, if your purpose or goal is to be compliant with GDPR rules and regulations, you're doomed to fail. Because there's only a downside. Because if you comply with those rules, there's no upside, and if you fail, then there's a downside, right? But think of it this way: privacy. So you want to be very intimate with your user, and you want to know everything about your user as much as possible, because then you can service him or her better, and then you better manage the privacy risk, because privacy is a feeling. So if you do stuff that invades the privacy of your user, then we will stop buying from you. So better have a program that says, well, we want to be very intimate with the clients. We want to gather as much data as possible and use it. So we better manage their privacy risks. And then there's an upside. And then investment in, because there is no privacy without security, so it's the enabler of managing privacy risks. Then investments in this becomes an enabler. It will enable you to get more value out of data. Good cyber risk management will enable you to innovate faster. That's the upside. So it's not a cost, it's an investment.
Okay. Markus once said that in a previous discussion that developers like to think in projects instead of in processes.
Yes, exactly. That's I think a part of the issue that everybody who has software developed in this room knows software is never finished actually. So thinking of it as a project is maybe not the best approach, because in many cases I know a lot of developers who say this piece of software is still in use, really? We just did this, I don't know, provisional for something, or I would never have thought that after 20 years this is still in use. And this is also something, the aspect of sustainability. People do not think that the code they will, the program today might be in use in a large environment 10, 15 years of now. And we see a lot of examples. Also, Microsoft, of course, still has code that's 20 years old in its repositories. And I think it's important to, at least once in the development cycle, that you think, okay, where could this lead in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years? So what are the parameters that we should think of, cloud or not cloud, or at least trying to envision in which direction it could go, also in terms of design decisions, technology decisions. Don't just take the first tool that's hype because you saw a Twitter feed about it and nobody knows if it exists in 6 months anymore. So questions of how much to integrate of different solutions, different libraries, different providers in the long term, because in many cases the software will be in use much longer than you originally anticipated. And I think this is something that, in a typical startup, the last thing you think about is, in 15 years. And you think about, okay, we need a solution now. I don't give a rat's ass where this is in 10 years or 15 years. We have to push it out now. And I think this way of thinking is quite common also in established companies. And I think this long term, this is a really bad idea.
So your message is, if we update an operating system and it's no longer downwards compatible, that's a good thing, because we get rid of the old legacy.
To be honest, at certain points, I think it would also have been better for Microsoft to state, okay, now we have to make a cut, end of life. I know that with
Customers
XP
don't
and
like end of life.
Yeah. This is a whole different discussion. But of course, at some points you have to say, okay, we get rid of that legacy code, and also because which parts of the codes are those that make you headaches in terms of security? In most cases, it's the older codes where you have stuff like buffers or buffer overflows or things like that. If you develop with modern instruments and managed code IDEs, it's almost impossible for certain classes of vulnerabilities to still implement it. You really would have to incorporate them willingly, because otherwise it's just not possible anymore.
So it's more than 80% of this legacy, they have issues because they're not updated, patched anymore. And the second is, people don't patch. It takes 150 days on average till they update the infrastructure, which is the second main issue.
By the way, this is also an argument for open source development. So it shows that open source with a community of developers that continuously look and work on code is obviously that's really secure by design.
There's something?
No.
I'm still going to ask you something. You have 25 years in the business. What have we achieved? Where are we further than we were 10, 15 years ago? What are things that work more stable, more secure, with a different perspective, in some way better in the development business?
Yeah, I'm a positive guy, and I think we achieved a lot, but we're not there yet. And let me explain that, because we are going fast in the security, but the bad guys are also going fast. And while the computer technology becomes cheaper every year, and they have more possibilities, the bad guys, and they are fully automated and integrated, we, as the defenders, we also have to go into that automated direction. We cannot fight fully automated adversaries with old-fashioned point products. So what you see is that a lot of companies, they are moving into the holistic cybersecurity platform approach, which I think they should, because everything now is interconnected and instrumented. So yes, we achieved a lot, but we are not there yet. And it also depends on the maturity of certain industries. For example, the financial industry is, I think, further ahead than the critical infrastructure, like the oil and gas companies. And they're also using much older equipment. So So there's a difference in maturity, but I think we are getting better, but we're not there yet, because the bad guys also getting better and faster and smarter and so on. So yeah, I think we achieved a lot, but it's a continuous story. So that's my positive side, I would say.
Any other statements to what we have achieved in the last 10, 15 years?
I'd have one, because it's an interesting question. If you ask, are we now more secure than 10 or 15 years ago? It's not that easy to answer, actually, because I agree with you, we have achieved a lot. No question about that. But also the systems are getting more and more complex, more and more interdependent. We rely more and more on them. So the dependability is also increasing. So overall, I'm not sure if we are really, more secure, or the stakes are just higher.
Well, I see an increase in the awareness, luckily, but on the other hand, I also see an increase in hooking smart devices onto the internet, and 3.1 billion smart devices on the internet, and 70% of those smart devices are not secured by design. So I see the same trend also, that on the one hand, we are getting better. Yeah, we get more awareness, we get more best practices, we learn from things that we faced. But on the other hand, we have a very big challenge with all the IoT of the Internet of Things, and how fast is software development going? We have 24-hour cycles in software development. Well, I don't see a 24-hour cycle in a security development yet. So,
just what I'm missing is this scalability of security investments. So digitalization, digital age is an exponential phenomenon. It's growing rapidly, faster and faster. So our business model also have to change to compensate the exponential growth of risk and price and cost and so on. Yeah? So these principles we have engineered the last year will also have to change to scale even faster. Yeah? So, and you mentioned the ethical stuff. So the hackers are trying or starting artificial intelligence, for example. And we are discussing, is this ethical correct to fight against them with artificial intelligence? We will lose in that perspective. Yeah? So these are new principles we have to think about in a different, scalable way.
You agree, obviously.
Yeah, I think I'm like Fred, I'm optimistic. Maybe that's a Dutch trait, I don't know. But think of it in evolutionary terms. And I mean, the weak species will not survive. So if you can't survive, it's like your immune system. You will sick and die. And the species, and it's not the most intelligent or the most strong species that will survive, as Darwin was saying. It's the species who's most adaptable to change. And I thought about this question, but let me give you one, I think, shining example of how this should be done. Once I had a conversation with the security officer of PayPal. And for me, as a security consultant, that was like talking to the striker of Real Madrid. And as you know, paying with PayPal is very easy. It's username, password. There's no rules for your password. You don't need to update it regular. You can write it down. It's very easy. So after 15 minutes in that conversation, I said, username, password, it's a lousy security measure. But that doesn't protect anything. And his answer was, yeah, we know. And that's why we invest every day in security analytics. We have developed our own technology, Palantir. We have the best team in the world. And we are second to none in identifying false transactions before they happen so we can stop them. And there is a certain loss. But we can keep this loss at an acceptable level because we're so damn good at this. And by the way, every time it goes wrong, we learn. We get better at this every day. And that's why paying with PayPal is a superior user experience. Well, this is secure by design. This is security as an enabler. This is well, you can even say, well-designed, minimal security as a business model.
Okay. What about the big topic of the cloud? So many companies still don't trust. What would you as experts say or
let's
tell all these companies that don't feel secure when they think about
Yeah.
cloud.
There's this at the beginning, mostly, if my data is in the cloud, I don't know where it is, so it's less secure, which is, you can also flip it around. If you don't know where your data is, it's very secure, right? That was a joke. But let's just assume that Microsoft in this case, or Google, or Amazon, does have the skill and also the willingness, and it's part of the strategy to invest in top-notch security. Better than you as a startup or a medium business will be able to do. So I think if reasons to go to the cloud is not because of security, but it definitely can be one of the reasons. You can use all the expertise and technology and all the investments that Microsoft does in security. But by the way, you cannot outsource it. So you can assume that the infrastructure on which the Azure is running, it complies with all the standards. They can prove it. But somebody will access it. You still have identity and access management. There's still lots of responsibility on your side to make sure that your application or whatever is safe. So a lot of things will be taken care of by the cloud provider, but that doesn't mean that you are.
It's a shared responsibility. Yeah. Cloud security is a shared responsibility. The cloud provider is responsible for the security of the cloud, the infrastructure, but you are always keeping the responsibility for your own data and your own applications in the cloud. So keep that in mind, that if you go to the cloud, if you're using the cloud, and we are also using the cloud to secure our products, so we're using the cloud as a benefit, but please keep in mind that if you go to the cloud with your data, you always keep the responsibility yourself. And the cloud provider is, especially Microsoft, is helping a lot because they're doing a tremendous job in securing the cloud. But keep in mind it's a shared responsibility, so it's very important to act it in that way.
Markus, would you trust the cloud more than your own system?
Yes, of course, because the clouds are the most attacked systems on the planet. Doesn't matter, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, billions and billions of attacks a day. So they're really very good. I don't know of any breach in the last months, or I don't know if Asia has ever been breached. And those are really large infrastructures. We're talking about tens of thousands of servers spanning the whole globe. So of course they know their security, and obviously better than the average company. Also in terms of the hardware, do you really want to hassle with data centers and all that? I mean, those are standardized data centers according to certain ISO standards. I mean, that's just, you cannot easily compete with that. In terms of the quality, because of those scaling effects. I agree with you completely. Of course, you need a strategy. Don't rely on a single cloud provider, hoping that this will work for the next 15 or 20 years. It's always good to look at various cloud offerings, also in terms of getting your data back if you need it, in terms of geo-redundancy, where your data is. Many people forget that clouds usually don't offer backup services. So backups are your thing to do and not the cloud provider thing, because they are a cloud service and not a backup service. And although they are redundant and on certain, but they do not guarantee that the data will not be lost. And there has been incidents where some data was lost on a different cloud provider's infrastructure. Quite a lot of data went up, but it was legitimately said, well, that's what we do. We just offer the data. Backup is your thing. So it's important, that don't just rush and take the next cloud solution and think, yeah, this is it. You have to embed it in some kind of strategy to ensure that 5 years from now you're still satisfied with the decision you're taking today.
Okay. We have a maximum of another 9.5 minutes. I'm a little bit surprised I don't see any questions here. Is that a technical issue, or are there really no questions in the room?
Because we are so clear.
Oh, there they are. Okay.
Then we should ask some questions to the audience. Pick someone.
Okay. There's a fun one. How long are your personal passwords?
Yeah.
Okay, I use a password manager, at least 12 characters. always mix upper and lower letters and special letters, and use some kind of manager. It doesn't matter if it's open source or if it's LastPass or anything like that, but still passwords is one of the, that we're still discussing this in 2018 is kind of embarrassing, because this is really nothing new. And still one of the greatest problems also for cloud providers. If you choose a bad password, it's not their fault, it's your fault. And people still reuse their passwords, and never reuse a password. That's the for you personally, the one thing that makes your digital life, 10 times more secure is never to use a password twice. Then most of the problems that you read about in the newspaper will never happen to you.
And combined with the password manager, which I also use, we use two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, which it's not a guarantee that you're completely protected, but it helps a lot.
And well, my passwords are very long because I use sentences, which is very secure. So like random sentences. This is, by the way, not a real password I use, but as an example, there's a horse standing in the hallway. Nobody will break that, and it's something that I can remember.
Okay. Nothing to add?
I think that the password itself is not the issue. Yeah? The privileges you own in your system when you get hacked, when your identity is stolen. Yeah? Normally when I'm discussing this with companies, I always ask one question. What are the privileges your domain administrator are owning? What's the normal answers? And be honest, raise your hand if your domain administrator has all system privileges. Be honest. Huh?
Most of them,
Most of them, yeah. Just imagine if this identity gets compromised, you're done. Yeah? 70% of all security issues are identity theft of domain admins. Yeah? No matter how the password is, if it gets compromised, and there are some good tricks to do that, phishing and things like that, you're done. Yeah? That's not done, by the way, in the cloud. There are no privileges, no standing privileges. Think about this.
Okay, I have the bad role of having to be the one who chooses which questions we take. And I also have to find a last round. I think that the one question about what has Deloitte learned is a little bit too specific for the topic. Maybe this is something we can clear.
Maybe, yeah. It feels like a challenge.
But can you say it in one sentence? Otherwise,
Yeah,
I
I can keep it short. First
really,
of all,
really short, please.
Yeah, because we are cybersecurity consultants, a lot of people think it's funny that we were hacked. But I will say, if your doctor gets sick, that's not a reason to say it's a bad doctor. And what we've learned from it is that that we were hacked is everybody can be hacked. The way we communicated about it, how transparent we were, how timely we were about disclosing this. That's a lesson we learned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to use the last 3 minutes or 4 minutes we have to look a little bit in the future. Where will it go from here? What will be the next 2 or 3 steps we will have to go in order to build a reasonable security that is able to stay in resonance with the living system out there, but still moves things in, let's say, a control that makes it more reasonable? You are the experts. Where are we going to hear it if not from you? Or if you can't give answers, at least we know that where we are at. Could you please, each one of you, state 1 or 2 things where you think we have to work on, where it is worth working on in the next years in order to make cyberspace a bit more secure in a way that stays in a living resonance with what happens around? Please, whoever wants to start.
Well, then I'll start. I think one of the major issues is IoT security. You already mentioned this, and I think this is really one of the worst things that we have. That some Chinese manufacturer puts out a web camera for $12, has absolutely no financial incentive to support it, to provide updates to the drivers. So the whole business model of selling hardware and making the profits from selling the hardware doesn't work anymore with IoT devices. And I think the more IoT devices we have in our homes, the more potential microphones we have and the more potential video surveillance we have, and that's really a bad thing. I think this will get worse, and there will be some incidents, and maybe then we will have some regulatory efforts to force the manufacturers to ensure at least some degree of security.
Okay, hardware issue. Who else wants?
Yeah, I can say something about the future. I think the future of security is being the automation and using the cloud as security, as a security tool. We are disrupting ourselves, so we created now an app store for security. That means that if you are security, if you're working in security, you can just choose the apps, the functionalities that you need for your security, which means you have the same pace as the development of technology is going. You cannot do security anymore the old-fashioned way. We need to go from the cloud, using the technology, using blockchain, using all the hype words that we hear now, but we need to go in that direction. So that's for my vision for security. So it needs to be effortless and automated.
Okay, clear statement. Thank you very much. Would you?
Yeah, maybe some food for thought. Let's think 5-10 years in the future, and let's assume you're not developing software anymore. You are training artificial intelligence system. Think about this situation. It's not more about writing secure code. It's about training our intelligence models in a secure way. What does this mean for your job? What's your accountability? What's changing in the environment? And you will realize, and it starts now, it's trust. How do we build trustable system? What's the experience? What's the trust you put in technology? And we need trust as an industry that our stuff gets used. It's that innovation continues. If we don't build trustable system, innovation will end in some way.
The biggest reduction of complexity, trust. Please.
Yeah, so maybe 3 things. One thing I already mentioned. So all the coders out there should become hackers, which is fun. So teach yourself, hack your own thing that you develop yourself. So that's one. I think the second one is more cooperation. I think the attackers, they're well organized. They exchange attack and loot, and they have platforms on the dark web. And I think we on the defensive side can cooperate more, learn from each other's mistakes, learn from each other's incidents, share threat intelligence. It's just so cooperate. And then I think thirdly is there is something in the blockchain paradigm, like a protocol which is unbreakable, distributed ledger, distributed computing, which I think it's a fundamental answer to the digital dilemma we have.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the other questions. We have 45 seconds left, so just enough to say goodbye. Thank you for everyone in the room for participating. Thank you for everyone on the stage for contributing, for traveling all the way, for sharing your time with us. And I hope there were a few points that are interesting. And have a nice weekend and a good afternoon. Bye-bye.